Another month, and the army of not in the labour force Americans continues to grow in record fashion. So, of course, the unemployment rate looks fantastic when you yank out 95 million people from your analysis. Last month, a stunning 608,000 people were added to the not in the labour force category. Sure, some of this is accounted for from old people hitting retirement age, but definitely not to this outsized level. The labour force figures don't really shed a great light on the employment situation in the United States. For example, you also have millions of people working in low-paying jobs but burdened by extremely high student debt. Is it a problem that we added 608,000 people to the not in the labour force category? Those not in the labour force highlights a hidden part of America. You have millions of people living in the deep shadows of the American dream. The idea of retiring and living large is mostly a marketing ploy to get you to stuff your money into inflated funds and juiced up stocks so you can part with your hard-earned money. Only half those actually own any kind of stocks, and for the most part the 401k has been a massive transfer of wealth from the people to Wall Street. Yet here we are with a growing army of people living in the shadows. This is nuts. Just break down the numbers. There have been 1.6 million people per year added to the not in the labour force category over the last 10 years. Since 2007, those not in the labour force have grown by 16 million. There are now nearly 95 million people not in the labour force. This is difficult to comprehend, and the mainstream press still fails to acknowledge this group in any serious discussion. This number is roughly 1 out of 3. This is an important topic to discuss. These are largely older people who need to rely on social security, and their healthcare costs, by the way, are going to soar. They are also asking a large younger population to support this group while their wages are depressed. The problem with having this number so high is the draw upon the system. We're seeing it with Medicare and Social Security. America continues to overspend on healthcare per person, yet the costs continue to soar, while well-being doesn't seem to be going up all that much. You wonder why these numbers continue to go up. The headline unemployment rate would indicate that all is well. It would seem that the economy is booming on all fronts, including the stock market, real estate, and employment. Yet somehow, 1 out of 3 people is now part of the 95 million that are not in the labour force. There are 2 Americas, and people likely feel that there are also 2 economies running parallel to each other. You simply cannot believe anything that the mainstream press says any longer. We are living in Orwellia. What is occurring is akin to a magic show where deception is the name of the game, drawing attention to meaningless stories while the crooks behind the magicians are actively stripping the citizenry of their life, liberty, property, and pursuit of happiness. Critically important issues go unreported. The citizenry doesn't even understand the import of what's going on around them. Behind it all is the Federal Reserve, which has provided the opiates in the form of easy money so that the populace is so drugged up that they've been temporarily shielded from the effects of the actions which will eventually ruin their way of life. The populace has been trained to be idiots. I am now going to reveal to you the most stunning piece of statistical information I have ever come across in all of my years in this business. Quite simply, the rate of growth over the last 10 years is identical, I repeat, identical to that of the 1930s, the Depression years. Just so you know I'm deadly serious about this, let me quickly give you the annual statistics for GDP from 1930 to 1940 and then from 2007 to 2017. Okay? These, by the way, are all in percentages. Here we go. 1930, minus 8.5. 1931, minus 6.4. 1932, minus 12.9. 1933, minus 1.3. 1934, plus 10.8. 1935, plus 8.9. 1936, plus 12.9. 1937, plus 5.1. 1938, minus 3.3. And 1939, 8. The average rate of economic growth during that entire period was 1.33%. That's really bad, but it's the kind of number you'd expect from the Great Depression. So then I looked up the numbers for the last 10 years. Here they are, again, in percentages. 2007, plus 1.8. 2008, minus 0.3. 2009, minus 2.8. 2010, plus 2.5, 2011, plus 1.6, 2012, plus 2.2, 2013, plus 1.7, 2014, plus 2.4, 2015, plus 2.6, and 2016, plus 1.6. When you average these years together, incredible as it may seem, you get an average rate of economic growth of exactly 1.33%. The exact same figure as during the Depression years. The 1930s certainly had more big ups and downs, but the average rate of economic growth during that decade was exactly the same as we've seen over the past 10 years. Surely those of you who've been with me for a while remember how over the past 8 years I've repeated over and over and over again, there's no economic recovery, there's no economic recovery, there's no economic recovery. All the while trying to get you to ignore the constant bullish babble of the mainstream media. Of course, the early 1940s turned out to be a boom time for the US economy, while it appears that the current rate of economic growth is actually slowing down even further. US GDP growth during the first quarter of 2017 was just plus 0.7%. The hard and grim fact is that the past decade's stunning and utterly absurd $10 trillion in deficit spending has produced the worst economic growth as measured by gross domestic product in the nation's history. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you heard that right. In the past decade, the nation's economy grew more slowly than even during the Great Depression. This stagnant, new normal, low-growth economy is leaving millions upon millions of working-age Americans behind who have given up even trying to participate. And it's led to a malaise where most people now correctly doubt that the American dream is even remotely attainable. No prizes for guessing why the 1930s and recent outcomes are so different. The criminals at the Federal Reserve have simply counterfeited more and more money to try to fool the people into thinking that their situations are better than they really are by goosing asset values such as housing and the stock market. But as we've seen, they don't even remotely succeed in fooling the people. That's why Trump was so successful. He did fool them. He promised people the impossible in good faith, and they were desperate to believe him. Even I had hope somehow he could prevail upon the important people in his administration to succumb to his wishes. But it was not to be. Instead of draining the swamp, he's drowned in it. But now, instead of a 1940s-style recovery, we are about to see a plunge into the real hell of the economic downturn, as now the monumental debts that were initiated by that kindly old fiend Alan Greenspan are unwound, and massive bankruptcies and defaults are the result of debts which can never be repaid. This situation was unknown in the 1930s. There was a clear path to recovery, which is totally non-existent today. I assure you that the powers that be are aware of this, but they will never come clean. They will go on trying to make you believe that economic recovery is happening until they, like the passengers on the Titanic, are overwhelmed by reality. Then they'll bring us war to cover it all up.